No mummy has ever been found in the pyramids of Giza. That is not alternative theory. That is not speculation. It is documented archaeological fact. In over 200 years of intensive excavation and study of the three pyramids of Giza, the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafra, and the Pyramid of Menkaure, not a single royal mummy has ever been found. No funerary inscriptions were found inside the Great Pyramid. The pyramid texts, the prayers and magic formulas that appear in every other Egyptian pyramid, simply don't exist inside the Great Pyramid. It is virtually uninscribed on the interior. No canopic jars to hold mummified organs, no protective amulets, no ushabti figurines that should accompany the dead, no treasures that Egyptians buried with their kings. The Great Pyramid has none of the defining characteristics of an Egyptian tomb. And in 2018, physicists from 2 European universities published a peer-reviewed scientific study that confirmed something extraordinary. The Great Pyramid concentrates electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers. It functions like an antenna, like an energy resonator. This didn't come from a conspiracy blog. It was published in a scientific journal, with methodology, calculations, and peer review. So the question is simple and direct. Why would anyone build a tomb that functions as an energy antenna? The answer that conventional archaeology avoids giving is the most obvious one. Because it was never a tomb. Stay until the end. Because we're going to dismantle the biggest assumption in modern archaeology, block by block, chamber by chamber. Let's analyze the Great Pyramid as engineers, not as tourists dazzled by its size. If you were designing a tomb for the most powerful man in the world, what would it look like? Accessible, decorated with the name and achievements of the deceased, with space for all the objects he'd take into eternity, with corridors priests could use for rituals. The Great Pyramid is the opposite of that in almost every respect. Let's examine each internal element from the bottom up. The subterranean chamber. It sits carved directly into the bedrock below the pyramid. It appears unfinished. The walls are rough, unlined, undecorated. The conventional explanation: it was Khufu's original plan, then abandoned. He changed his mind and decided to build the chambers higher up. But pharaohs didn't change their minds mid-construction on their own tombs. The project was planned years in advance. Every detail was decided before the first stone was placed. A more coherent alternative explanation: the subterranean chamber was never meant to be finished. It had a technical function, perhaps related to capturing geothermal or vibrational energy from the bedrock below. The Queen's Chamber. Despite the name given by medieval Arabs, there is no evidence it ever housed a queen or any person. It sits at the geometric center of the pyramid. The strangest detail is the air shafts. The Queen's Chamber has 2 shafts rising at an angle, to the north and to the south. But they don't reach the exterior of the pyramid. Air shafts that ventilate nothing. For a tomb, this makes no sense. A mummy doesn't need fresh air. But for a machine, ducts that direct airflow or energy at specific angles make complete sense. And these shafts point toward specific stars, toward Orion's belt to the south, toward the North Star to the north. The Grand Gallery. This is the most impressive of the internal structures. 47 meters long, 8.5 meters high. The walls rise in steps, creating a stepped cross-section. Anyone who enters the Grand Gallery immediately notices that the acoustics are extraordinary. Sounds propagate in specific ways. Certain frequencies are amplified. Acoustic researchers have measured it. The Grand Gallery amplifies sounds in the low-frequency range with impressive precision. It functions like a giant organ pipe, but precisely tuned. Why would a tomb need acoustics? A mummy doesn't listen to music. For a machine that manipulates sound frequencies, acoustics is the central component. The King's Chamber. Here sits the most technically interesting element of the entire pyramid. The chamber is completely lined with granite from Aswan, the same hard red stone as the boxes in the Serapeum we saw in episode 1. The granite wasn't chosen for aesthetic reasons. Egypt has limestone in abundance, a far easier material to work with. Using granite, which had to be transported 800 kilometers, was a deliberate and costly choice. Why? Because granite contains quartz, and quartz has a fundamental physical property called piezoelectricity. When you compress or bend quartz crystals, they generate an electrical voltage, and when you apply an electrical voltage to them, they vibrate. This is the same principle used in microphones, submarine sonar, and medical ultrasound equipment. Granite packed with quartz, under constant pressure and vibration, generates electricity. Above the king's chamber, there are 5 relieving chambers, cavities stacked one above another. The conventional explanation is that they distribute the weight of the pyramid above. But the queen's chamber directly below has no relieving chambers and has never collapsed in 4,500 years. The weight is distributed by the angles of the pyramid itself, not by chambers. The relieving chambers serve another function, possibly acoustic, possibly to create specific pressure on the granite below. The sarcophagus. A granite box in the king's chamber. No lid. The lid was never found. No inscriptions, no mummy, no evidence of funerary use. And it's larger than the entrance to the chamber. This means it was placed there during construction, not afterward. It was part of the original design. If it was a sarcophagus, why is there nowhere to put a lid? Why are there no inscriptions with the name of the pharaoh supposedly to be buried there? The complete structure of the Great Pyramid, from the subterranean level to the apex, makes sense as a machine. It makes no sense as a tomb. In 2018, 2 research groups published a study in the Journal of Applied Physics. This is not a fringe publication. The Journal of Applied Physics is one of the most respected scientific publications in the world in the field of applied physics. The researchers were from ITMO University in St. Petersburg, Russia, and from the Laserzentrum Hanover in Germany. The title of the study, Investigation of the Great Pyramid of Giza as a Resonator of Electromagnetic Energy. They created a precise computational model of the Great Pyramid, geometry, materials, proportions, and simulated how electromagnetic waves interact with this structure. What they discovered was surprising. When electromagnetic waves in the wavelength range of 200 to 600 meters interact with the pyramid, the structure concentrates them in 2 specific places: the internal chambers, specifically the king's chamber and the queen's chamber, and the base, the foundation of the pyramid. The intensity of the electromagnetic field in these regions is significantly greater than it would be without the pyramidal structure. In plain language, the pyramid takes electromagnetic energy from the surrounding environment and focuses it at specific points in its interior. It works like an antenna, like a resonator. The researchers were careful in their conclusions. They explicitly stated they were not claiming the pyramid was intentionally designed for this function. They were only describing what they physically observed, but what they observed is real and verifiable. Now combine this with independent acoustic studies. Acoustic researchers who studied the king's chamber measured its resonant frequency at 121 Hz, close to the musical note F sharp. The granite sarcophagus resonates at 117 Hz. Slightly different. When 2 objects vibrate at very close frequencies, they create a phenomenon called a beat frequency, a pulse equal to the difference between the 2 frequencies. In this case, a pulse of 4 Hz falls in the delta range of brain waves, the state of deep sleep and, according to some research, altered states of consciousness. Was this intentionally designed? Was the pyramid built to induce specific states of consciousness in those who entered? I can't answer that with certainty, but I can say that no Egyptian tomb architect showed this acoustic care in any other sarcophagus or funerary chamber in Egypt. This is unique, deliberate, and unexplained. Mechanical engineer Christopher Dunn spent decades studying the Great Pyramid, not as an archaeologist, as an engineer, with eyes trained to identify systems, components, and mechanical functions. His conclusions were published in detail in the book The Giza Power Plant in 1998, and no academic debater has been able to satisfactorily refute his technical analysis. Dunn's hypothesis: the Great Pyramid was an acoustic and electromagnetic energy plant. Here's how the system would have worked, component by component. Step 1. The vibration source. The Great Pyramid is built on a limestone plateau. Beneath that plateau are aquifers, pockets of groundwater that flow and move continuously. Water moving through rock cavities generates vibration. It generates infrasound, frequencies below what the human ear detects, but which the physical body feels. This infrasound rises through the rock and enters the pyramid structure. Step 2. The amplification. The Grand Gallery, with its extraordinary acoustics and stepped walls, functions as an amplifier for specific frequencies. Dunn proposes that the niches in the walls of the Grand Gallery contained Helmholtz resonators, devices that amplify specific frequencies, like the sound you hear when blowing across the top of an empty bottle. These resonators would tune and amplify the vibrations coming from below, creating a precise resonance field. Step 3. The piezoelectric conversion. The granite in the king's chamber, packed with quartz crystals, was subjected to this amplified vibration field. Quartz crystals under vibration generate electricity. The more crystals, the more electricity. The more intense the vibration, the more energy generated. Aswan granite has a high concentration of quartz, between 20% and 30% of its mineral composition. It was deliberately chosen for this property, not just for durability. Step 4. The transmission. The Great Pyramid originally had a complete external casing of Tura limestone, a white, extremely polished limestone. So polished it shone in the sun like metal. Limestone is a good electrical insulator. The pyramid with its casing would have been like a giant capacitor, generating and storing electrical charge in the conductive granite structure inside, insulated by the limestone outside. The pyramidion, the apex stone, now disappeared, may have been made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver that is an excellent conductor. A terminal output for the energy being generated. The casing was removed over the centuries to build Cairo. The pyramidion disappeared at some point in history. The power plant was dismantled piece by people who didn't know what they were doing. What remains is the skeleton of the system. But even the skeleton still concentrates electromagnetic energy, as the 2018 study confirmed. Crazy? Maybe. But it explains the internal structure of the pyramid better than elaborate tomb for a pharaoh who was never found there. If the Great Pyramid was a machine, there was a manual. Someone knew how to build it, knew how to operate it, knew what it was for. Where is that knowledge? To answer that, we need to talk about Thoth. In the Egyptian pantheon, Thoth is unique, different from all the other gods. Ra was the sun god. Osiris was the god of the dead. Horus was the sky god. Isis was the goddess of magic. All of them had specific domains of the natural or supernatural world. Thoth was the god of knowledge itself as an absolute concept. Thoth invented hieroglyphic writing, at least that's what the Egyptian texts say. He created the system by which knowledge could be recorded and preserved. Thoth invented mathematics, geometry, astronomy, medicine. Thoth was the scribe of the gods, meaning he recorded everything. In any divine meeting, Thoth was present, documenting. The Greeks, when they encountered Thoth, immediately identified him with Hermes, their own god of knowledge and communication. They called him Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes 3 times great. The entire Western Hermetic tradition, medieval alchemy, Renaissance magic, philosophical Hermeticism, claims to derive from the knowledge of Thoth Hermes. But who was Thoth really? The Egyptian texts describe him as having existed before the dynasties, as being one of the first, not born of other gods, but simply existing from the beginning. Some Egyptian traditions say Thoth came from a distant land. He brought the knowledge of a civilization that had been destroyed. He established himself in Egypt and taught. Does that sound familiar? It's the same pattern as the Shemsu-Hor from episode 1. Thoth may have been one of the Shemsu-Hor, or perhaps the most important of them, the central guardian of technical knowledge. And before departing, before withdrawing from public life, whatever that means concretely, he stored the most important knowledge, so it wouldn't be lost again. He stored it beneath the Sphinx, in the Hall of Records. The Hall of Records is not just an esoteric legend. There are references to secret chambers in Giza in ancient Egyptian texts. The Book of Thoth, a text that supposedly contains supreme knowledge, is described as being hidden somewhere in the Giza area. The medieval Arab tradition, which preceded modern archaeology, consistently speaks of chambers and treasures beneath the pyramids and the Sphinx. And Edgar Cayce, the American sleeping prophet who made hundreds of documented psychic readings in the 1930s and 1940s, specifically described a chamber beneath the front paws of the Sphinx, containing records of Atlantis, containing the true history of humanity's origins. Cayce made this statement decades before any scanning technology existed to verify it. In 1991, researchers used seismic equipment around the Sphinx. Robert Schoch, Yale geologist, and Thomas Dobecki, geophysicist, conducted the study. They found clearly defined anomalies beneath the Sphinx, a rectangular cavity beneath the front paws, with dimensions of approximately 12 meters long by 9 meters wide. Not natural, with defined edges, a chamber. In 1996, researchers from Florida State University repeated the experiment with different technology, ground-penetrating radar. They obtained similar results: chambers, defined structures beneath the Sphinx. Two independent studies, different methodologies. Same conclusion. There is something constructed beneath the Sphinx. The Egyptian government, which controlled access to Giza, became very interested in these findings and then shut everything down. Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities for many years, took full control of research at Giza. Excavation requests were denied. Independent researchers were prevented from conducting studies in the area. Hawass publicly declared that the anomalies were natural, that there was nothing significant beneath the Sphinx. But here's the logical problem with that statement. To know there's nothing significant in a place, you need to have investigated that place. Need to have opened it, excavated it, examined it. The Egyptian government didn't open it, didn't excavate it, didn't examine it. They simply declared there was nothing there and blocked any attempt to verify. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project, using muons, subatomic particles that penetrate any material and allow photographing the interior of massive structures, found an enormous void inside the Great Pyramid. 30 meters long, completely sealed, no known entrance. In 2023, a team found a hidden corridor just behind the main entrance of the pyramid, also sealed, also with no obvious purpose according to conventional archaeology. Every technological advance we manage to apply to Giza reveals something new hidden, and every time full access is limited, controlled, or denied. Why? That is the most honest question I can ask. There's one last element I can't leave out. The Great Pyramid's position is not random. If you divide Earth's surface into quadrants, separating continental landmass from ocean, the geometric center of those landmasses falls exactly at Giza. The probability of this being accidental is astronomically small. The latitude of the Great Pyramid is 29.9792458 degrees north. The speed of light in a vacuum is 299,792,458 meters per second. The same digits, rearranged but the same. Could this be coincidence? Maybe. But if it is, it's of an order that should make us pause. The pyramid's astronomical alignments are extraordinarily precise. It is aligned to true north with an error of only 3/60 of 1 degree, more precise than the Greenwich Observatory, built with 17th century modern technology. The shafts in the King's Chamber point toward Orion to the south and toward the North Star to the north, but calculated for the positions of those stars 10,500 years ago. Not today. Not today. 10,500 years ago. Why point to where the stars were 10,500 years ago? Because that's when the pyramid was designed, or when it was built. And the three Giza pyramids together replicate the pattern of Orion's belt, the three central stars of the constellation, also calculated for 10,500 BC. The builders left a date coded in the stars, a date far earlier than Egypt's conventional history, a date that coincides with the end of the Younger Dryas, the cataclysm we discussed in the Lost Civilizations Week, a date that says, this is where everything began again. Let's return to the question we started with. If the pyramids never held mummies, what were they built for? Modern science is telling us they concentrated energy. The internal structure suggests they converted vibration into electricity. The acoustics confirm they were designed to manipulate frequencies. The position and alignments show they were built by someone who knew the earth and sky with a precision that shouldn't have existed at that time. And where is the manual? Possibly beneath the Sphinx, in chambers we detected in 1996 with scientific instruments, and that we were never allowed to open. It may be that there's nothing there. It may be that the chambers are empty, or contain only natural rock. But the other possibility exists, and as long as access is denied, that possibility remains open. In the next episode, we'll talk about the Sphinx directly, the monument that guards those chambers, the monument that is not 4,500 years old, as geology has compellingly demonstrated, the monument whose head is not original, and what all of this means for the history of Egypt we were taught. Episode 3, The Forbidden Sphinx. Subscribe so you don't miss it. See you there.